I think there's something to that. I recall when I was working for Jim Baker, I said to him when we were talking about peacemaking, at one point I said to him, one thing you might say is, we can't want the peace more than the parties themselves. Well, I'd say threats to countries in the region, in the first instance, ought to be handled by countries in the region. If there's one lesson we should have learned from the past, that's it. Now that doesn't mean we're relieved of the need to help them, particularly if we think it's going to affect our well-being. And the fact is, a division of labor where we provide support from the outside, we provide them not just material, but even when it comes, if they're facing a threat, the kind of capabilities we have in terms of intelligence, which maybe they don't have, the kind of capacity to fuse intelligence in military operations, again, which maybe they don't have, certain kinds of systems that lend themselves to the nature of the threat that they're facing. By the way, it's not always the most advanced systems. It may be systems that are much more useful for dealing with terror threats and counterinsurgency. That isn't always the most advanced aircraft. It's not always the most advanced radars. It may be, attack helicopters that create greater mobility. It may be the armaments that go with that again, give you a lot of firepower that can be applied more precisely. So precision-guided munitions on helicopters, maybe that's the kind of thing we should be helping, and relevant training. But the idea that we should be handling regional or internal threats from the outside, I think is self-defeating, because we tend to make ourselves the target then. And you also tend to delegitimize those that you're helping. If they're fully legitimate, they really shouldn't need help from the outside if they're facing a local threat. If they're facing a threat from, say, the Russians, that's a different story. If they're facing a big power threat, that's a different story. But if it's a purely domestic or regional threat, then they ought to be able to handle it. We ought to be able to be supportive of them and make it easier for them to do that and to feel more confident as they do.